In terms of the 4 key components of PBIS, discouraging misbehavior is another piece of prevention as it is considered a part of teaching. Remember, effective instruction requires feedback on behavior. If we don't tell the student that he or she is right or wrong, it is impossible for learning to take place. In the last module, we talked about feedback for positive behavior, and now we need to talk about feedback for misbehavior. Here are some of the big ideas for responding to misbehavior within a PBIS system. First, acknowledging student misbehavior is critical to effective instruction, and this needs to be discussed and agreed upon by all adults. There is a tendency for some adults to think that responses to misbehavior must be big and mean in order to be effective. This is not true, and we will discuss this in more detail a bit later. Second, we need to consider a full range of possible consequences that are available prior to larger and more exclusionary consequences. We want to keep it simple and effective. Which brings us to our last point. Feedback for misbehavior needs to be logically tied to behavior, be applied in a consistent manner, and taught so that students understand that a consequence is something they earned through the behavior they present, not something adults give to them. In reality, anything we do after a behavior that is meant to make that behavior occur less frequently is a type of punishment. But people tend to think of punishment only as a mean and brutal consequence. So it's best to use terms such as responding to behavioral errors, feedback for negative behavior, or consequences for misbehavior. In fact, it's probably most accurate just to think of what we're considering as being no different from how we would respond if a student had an academic error. The goal is to make the error stop or extinguish the behavior, and success or appropriate behavior to take its place. But as we do this, we need to consider what practices provide the best probability for encouraging future success. As with positive consequences, the goal is to use the least amount necessary to facilitate student success. We don't hand out money when we could get the same effect by saying thank you. And so we should be considering the same logic with consequences for misbehavior. The mildest form of this feedback is correction. Correction often begins with a question, such as, what is the right way? Or what would be a better way? And then leading the student through corrective practice and providing positive feedback. This still meets our definition because it is something we do to make an error less likely to occur in the future. But note that we do this by making a positive behavior more likely. For students with challenging behaviors and those with mental health challenges, corrective feedback is much less likely to result in escalating anger and negative emotions. While there are certainly circumstances under which a student should be removed from the classroom or the school building, meaning detention or suspension, this must be a last resort. We know that the best predictor of suspension is suspension. If we know suspension is not a deterrent to misbehavior, then why do we continue to use it if it does not result in a change in the student's behavior? A discussion of effective consequences for misbehavior is key to making this work within a school's PBIS system. As part of a PBIS plan, the PBIS team or MTSS team needs to facilitate a discussion among all faculty and staff to determine responsibility for a range of typical misbehaviors. Of course, the administrator will have some final say in terms of what behaviors warrant immediate referral to the office. But for all other behaviors, there needs to be a discussion of effective responses. One thing we know is that new and inexperienced teachers often do not have a bag of tricks or a set of strategies from which to choose. In this case, they are far more likely to resort to exclusion as a first response. Here's another example of a graphic depiction of a school's agreements with regard to what behaviors need to be addressed and by whom. This one does a nice job of providing both a flowchart for process and clear definitions of the behaviors. Note that the consequences are not listed here. They are just discussed. We don't want to dictate that every teacher will use the same consequences. Context matters, and we want faculty and staff to have the ability to make instructional decisions. While some people believe that consequences for misbehavior must be harsh in order to be effective, others have a tendency to think that any form of consequence for misbehavior is unacceptable. They often cite the need for a positive relationship as reason not to use such consequences. But we have to keep reminding everyone that we are simply talking about instruction here. If we ask a student about 2 plus 2 and they responded with 5, we would recognize the need to let the student know that is not correct. We would pull out a set of manipulatives to teach the student that 2 plus 2 is 4. This does not mean we would need to yell, berate, shame, or otherwise provide harsh consequences. We need to continue to help people recognize that student misbehaviors are no different and that students will respond best to instructional feedback. Now that you know about responding to behavior, the next modules will dive into the development of monitoring plans and how data can be used to drive decision making.